YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for King-ohger episode 15. So this episode was a little bit of a focused episode on our Black Ranger, and honestly, it ended up being only an okay episode. Honestly, almost more of a slightly filler-ish comedic episode. I mean, it wasn't totally filler because things happen that move things forward, but I was kind of almost looking forward to this episode, not just because of the Spider Kumunos Mecha debut, but because I was hoping to be like a little bit more endeared to the Black Ranger because he's been probably my least favorite so far, the most annoying to me, even though I find his like methods and motivations to be understandable and interesting. And I was kind of hoping that maybe this episode would get me to like him more. And I didn't hate him in this episode, but it didn't end up being as good of an episode for him as I thought. As we kind of delved into meeting his sister, and I thought that was going to dive deeper into his backstory, and we learned a little bit about his backstory, about how he became king, overcoming this previous tyrant king that was effectively hoarding all the food for the kingdom. And so, you know, he took over, and obviously he's been providing with a lot more food, and is willing to, as he always says, get down in the dirt to do whatever it takes to provide for his kingdom. And we basically just learn a little bit more details about that. And as far as his sister goes, you know, they kind of frame it before as if, like, Rackley's has her captive, and she's like miserable and he's got to save her, and it makes you think like, oh, you know, maybe Black Ranger's more sympathetic than we thought. And then this episode, it reveals that she actually doesn't mind being there. I guess she has Stockholm Syndrome or something, but she actually likes Rackley's and hopes to marry him or something, and it's kind of played, at least at the moment, or at that moment, more for laughs than anything else, between both her reaction and then his reaction to her, and then stuff with like Gira, where they find out about the sister and want to rescue her, and he does this whole tyrant bit, which is annoying. I feel like that should be more a facade, shouldn't it, for like the outside public? But I don't know, I just find it annoying when he delves into that. But there was some funny stuff where they disguise him. He like, you know, remember when they did Beetleborg's Bug Out? He does that, but like the low-tech version of that, and he like sneaks in, and there's some comedic stuff with him trying to save her. That stuff was admittedly kind of funny when he was like dressed up, because at first they're like, oh, we can use all these resources to dress you up for disguise, and then they show him just like normal standing. I'm like, what the hell outfit is that? And then he like leans over and it disguises as one of the little tiny shoe gods that like go around the city. And so there was some funny stuff there, but that's what I meant about it being mostly comedic. Like, we did learn more stuff about the sister and the relationship, and then they ask him, the Black Ranger, to choose sides, and he chooses Rackley's yet again to do whatever. And I don't know, I find that kind of interesting. Honestly, I thought this episode might be the final one where he unites with them, but I think keeping someone on Rackley's side at least keeps things a little more interesting, because one of the most interesting things about the show is the different factions that are forming and the different motivations. Like I've said numerous times, the interactions and relationships between the human characters and the conflicts is more interesting than the villain stuff. Although there's interesting villain stuff in there, but I don't know, we'll see where that goes. Bottom line is, with all that stuff in regards to the Black Ranger, although they did end on an interesting note where it seems it might be a part of a further ruse, with the sister also, you know, claiming like, oh yeah, I'll do whatever I can and get in the dirt for our kingdom. So maybe she's like secretly undercover. I think that was the vibe I was supposed to get. I was just a little confused because I feel like I was expecting one thing and it was mostly played for laughs, and then it ended on kind of a serious note. Admittedly, at least there's some interesting stuff that's more, well, interesting than the Black Ranger just suddenly being on team everyone else. Because for the most part, there's kind of an alliance between the other Rangers. But I don't know, we'll have to see. There is some interesting stuff in the episode that, you know, addresses the relationship between Rackley's and the Black Ranger, because the whole catalyst is that he asks him to set up a meeting with Jeremy so that he can set up a meeting with the Bugnrock. He's like, set up a meeting so I can set up a meeting. Like, you know how it is, meetingception. And it ends with Rackley setting up a meeting with the Bugnrock, which of course, Jeremy, I just said his name 5 seconds ago, you know, is happy about, because he wants some sort of interaction and peace between them. So that's admittedly something interesting. That's what I mean about this episode. Is kind of weird because it was kind of dressed like a filler episode in regards to some of the more filler feeling plot and funniness, but there was like important stuff happening. I mean, the stuff with Rackley's happened. We debuted Spider Kumunos Mecha and whatnot. Speaking of, that was like the end of the episode. It was kind of funny that like after kind of the build up, and I mentioned how I like the slow burn of just building the Mecha debut, that it kind of debuts on an episode that doesn't really have anything to do with Spider Kumunos, although admittedly he did have a little bit to do with the Black Ranger stuff. But and I was almost thinking, are they doing an episode for each Ranger where our 6th Ranger Jeremy bonds with each of them like we did with Gira? It almost seems like that. I didn't see him featured so much in the preview for next week, but I think that would be interesting. But his Mecha, like the full-on robot form, debuts, and it is all CG, which will probably be the status quo for the future, but admittedly it didn't look that bad, honestly. It looked better than most of the Dom Brothers and Zenkaiger CGI from what I can remember, and I liked it. I really do like the design. Like when I first saw the blurry pictures, I was like, what the hell is that? But then when we saw like the original first pictures, I'm like, oh, this is cool, but I feel like I could like it more. But the more I've seen of it, you know, in the toy pictures and stuff, and then the scans, and of course now this, I really like it a lot. It's a really cool mecha. It's probably my favorite individual one so far now, I think. I don't know, we'll have to see how I feel when I get the mecha when it ships, but I really like it. And it was a really fun debut fight. Again, kind of like a lot of King-ohger fights, it was kind of fun, dynamic, and unique, and made use of more acrobatics, which is possibly why it's kind of more CG-like. But I didn't mind it, and it was a fun debut for the mecha, and we got to debut I think we saw it last week, but we got to see the weapon form of the centipede with its cool chainsaw, which is really cool. Chainsaw, who's Shaw? I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting episode. I did like it okay. I would give it a 3 out of 5. I think it was a solid episode. It just wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. Not that I thought it was going to be gangbusters, but I guess I was just hoping to like the Black Ranger more coming out of this, and I kind of felt the same at the end of the day. Like, just to reiterate, it was just kind of an interesting episode in the sense that it felt like a filler episode, and yet there was a lot moving forward, which I guess is the best kind of filler episode, where you kind of have a more fun, light episode, but it feels like you're actually progressing the series forward, and it's not kind of a waste of time. I'm actually quite stoked for next week, though, because it looks to be Rita-focused, and I'm pretty excited about that, as they're still one of my favorite characters, and it looks to be a pretty good one, too, just based on the previews. But what do you guys think of this week's episode? Let me know in the comments, as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.